Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Time to Talk Titanic with myself, Aaron Flanagan, and
Hello.
co-host Louis
I said
Marcus.
that way too early. Sorry. I don't know what I said. I got nervous.
Go again, Louis. Have your moment.
Hello.
There you go. There's Louis.
Mm.
Like a pro, like a champ.
Oh yeah.
So, today we are going to be talking about the 1997 epic by James Cameron.
I think epic is an understatement.
Epic is an understatement. I was trying to think of a really sarcastic ship name that I could say there. But it's Titanic. We all know it's Titanic. You know, one day might make a Costa Concordia, who knows. But we are going to be talking about
The Poseidon Adventure.
Poseidon Adventure. Titanic. So, yeah, excited to get into it. And where to begin, Louis?
Oh, well, I think the best place to start, as many people will agree, is probably the beginning. But I think to save time, we can skip past all the sort of future stuff. Not future, but the modern day
Absolutely.
scenes, and just get straight
Yep.
into the history and the 1912 scenes. Before we started,
Yeah.
actually, I wanted to mention something to you, which I don't know how I haven't mentioned this to you before, because it's still my family in Titanic, and it's just one of those things that I don't know. I just assumed I've already told you,
Mhm.
and that. Hey, let me 2 seconds. Let me just. See, it was actually a message that my mum sent to me. So my grandfather told my mum that he saw the Titanic, and basically from the beginning he warned everyone that the ship was going to sink, and no one was listening to him. He went around and was warning everyone,
Wow.
and he warned them.
And what,
He warned them on several occasions. This ship is going to sink.
what made him think that? Was it the size of the ship? Did he think,
I don't know.
like, that's just...
I honestly don't know, but he was running around saying the ship's going to sink, it's going to sink, and he warned them on several occasions until eventually he got kicked out of the cinema. So bad.
Louis. Louis.
So 1997's epic Titanic.
Louis, I don't even have words. Yeah. Oh, wow. Spoiler alert, it sinks.
Christ.
I was not expecting that. I was like, wow, that's,
Yeah.
that's like... And you were saying grandfather, but I was like, I assume he just means great grandfather. Obviously.
Yeah, obviously.
He's just shaved off a few greats there. Like, it's no biggie.
I was just reading it off a meme.
That's so. I hope I'm going to use that.
Oh,
like, because people know I'm into Titanic, so they'll be like, by the way, and they'll be like quite invested because, oh, this must be good because like Aaron's, they won't be expecting me to come out with that, and just like I wasn't expecting you to come out with that, and I've now stolen that, and I will use that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That's my new party piece.
So I think we can start with the 1997 film. It's the opening scene, the amazing scene. You've got that transition from the shipwreck as the camera pans to the right and it slowly fades into the modern day. And you've got Southampton, you've got the docks, you've got the people, the crowd, the cars, and most importantly, the ship, which is there. And I think what's most impressive about that, which I'm sure you're aware, and many other people that are going to listen to this, is that whole scene is just mirrored. Like,
Yep.
They built the right side of the ship and went, wait, but they docked on the left, and just mirrored it. Got everyone backwards uniforms, and
because they had to build the side of the ship where, as they were filming on it, the opposite side, so the side looking past, it would have ocean in the background, so it would just be
the ocean.
And so obviously the side with the ship would be, there was like vans, cars, like lights, all that kind of thing. So, but that is incredible. And they even put Kate Winslet's mole.
Yes, on the other side.
On the opposite side of her face, which is just an attention to detail that's just commendable.
I noticed today for the first time as well, if you look on the bridge wing, you've got the port light, which is red, and the starboard, which is green. And obviously they filmed it on the right side, so that would have been a green light. But they've even changed that. They've even changed the light on the set to make sure it's the right colour, so that people know, okay, this is the port, this is the left.
That's good. It is incredible. I do, even before you get to Southampton, the fact that they used, so they used real footage of the submersibles over the real wreck.
Yeah.
But then they also had a large model of the ship on the ceiling.
Yeah.
And moved little mini submersibles over that. And so they kind of use the two so that they can get shots that, okay, they actually couldn't get on the wreck, but they want them for the narrative of the story.
Yeah.
And that even James Cameron himself was fooled sometimes with some of them. Like, he thought they were real, but they were actually... And they'd filled the room with smoke as well.
I feel like some of them you can tell, if you look close enough, you can see that with some shots the camera's a bit shakier than the others, and you can tell that that's someone holding the camera and their hands a little bit shaky as they're going over the miniature.
Yeah, there's a few, if you've got that eye and you're kind of, not even necessarily if you're looking for it, but probably if someone said to you, some of them are real, some are a model, could you figure out what ones?
Yeah.
Probably someone could. And the techniques that they would use to get the wood to look like it had been underwater for a long time, like they'd burn them, which is just really interesting, because you think, right, how do I make something look like it's been wet for 100 years?
Yeah.
Set it on fire. Like, it's really, really commendable, the fact that they were able to make the model, the sets, the wood, look like that. The model's just amazing. I actually wonder where that particular model is now, that they used for the underwater submersible shots. In fact, I don't know where the large models are now.
I think they're at the there's the Fox Studios, which you can tour at, and I believe they've got a Titanic section which has got some parts of the set still remaining, including the stateroom which Rose and Cal shared. I believe that's there, or at least a mock-up of it. But I know they have got one of the models there. I believe it's the $1 million shot model, the main model that they had.
Yeah, because that would be a shame if they were to get destroyed or recycled. That would be just awful. But I don't think they did.
Well, it's the
same fate.
It's the same fate that happened to the Razor Titanic model, is that they've just left it in Malta at the studio, and people have offered to buy it, and they've refused. And this model, which was, it was historically accurate to a point until they started adding things to it to make it look more like the ship they filmed on. But now it's just a brown, crumbled mess left out in the sun. And they're still refusing to let people buy it or to save it.
It's really sad. That is sad.
Yeah.
So if they make another Titanic film, they might as well just put that model into a water tank and film that, because it's a rusted hunk.
Yeah.
Anyway, so job done.
If they did one now, it would all be CGI, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, it would be.
It would be CGI.
It would be, which is a shame, because nowadays, okay, everyone wants a return for their money.
Yeah.
In terms of like a movie studio. So when James Cameron approached the studio and said, I've seen the wreck of Titanic, I've been down there, and I've been thinking about it for so long, and this is what I want to make. And they were like, that's going to be really expensive. And he was like, damn right it is. And they were like, we don't really want to make that, because who's going to want to come and see something that, at that point, people were over it.
Yeah.
Like, there hadn't really been something in terms of a big film in a few decades. And even though the ship had been found, at the point that he was pitching it, say 9-10 years before, there just wasn't a huge interest in it. And I can see why they were apprehensive about it.
Oh, yeah.
But they also could trust Jim, and being a creative, and knowing that he is a creative and that he could make something that was going to draw in an audience.
Yeah.
But I don't think even he could have predicted the audience that it would bring in.
No, not at all.
And the fact that it would make that much money, and to this day have such a following, and be at one point the highest grossing film of all time.
Yeah.
I don't think he could have even predicted that.
No, I totally agree. Yeah.
But then was that because of Jack and Rose? Was that because of the drama, of the
I
sinking?
think it was
I think it's a combination.
a combination of the two. You know, the cast they had, not just Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet, but you know, the rest of the cast that made the ensemble and really brought everything to life. I think you know it was definitely a combination.
Totally.
Yeah.
Completely.
I did notice a little goof today when I was rewatching it and taking notes. Is that when Cal opens the door to let Rose out and the camera turns round, if you look through the door, you can actually see scaffolding at the area where the stern of the ship would be. Obviously, because that section they didn't build the bottom of it. They had part of the ship up to where the poop deck started, and then they didn't cover the side because they thought, oh, you're not going to show that. And you actually see the scaffolding on camera, which I thought was just a little interesting thing that I'd never seen before. I don't know if it's been covered up in the Blu-ray version. I was watching it on my phone, which is like an original version, so it's not got all the corrections. But I thought that was quite interesting, something that I hadn't seen before.
Yeah, I don't even think I've come across that. Not that I've not watched them in a long time, but when I was younger on YouTube, there's lots of Titanic movie mistakes,
Yeah.
and someone has edited them all together.
Yeah.
And okay, there's a few. There's quite a lot. There's the reflection of the cameraman with the light on his camera.
That is a terrible one.
walking-
How did they
I
get
know,
that?
because you think like it's a camera, it's on a pole. You can see the man is pushing it, and it's got a light on it. But then that's got to be Jack walking through the door.
Yeah.
Like it's absolutely ridiculous that they were able to, pretty much make a ship sink vertically with people falling off and hitting off railings, but they weren't able to fix a glass window picking up a reflection. Like I feel like like at that point they were kind of not rushing, but I think there's little things that they were almost like, right, we need to get this into the cinema.
But I feel like at that shot you just cut that shot.
Yeah, of just walking through the door. Like they could have just had him coming in from the point of view of the room, and not just had him walking through. I get that it's kind of symbolic because you want to see it from his point of view. But they could have thought of another way of symbolism and showing his potential nerves, or the him breaking that divide of coming into first class. Like they could have thought of another way.
Yeah, which by the way would never have happened on the real Titanic. There's no way he would have got into that class, and no way Rose would have gone down to third class. Which is
well, I mean, Jack might have had cholera, so could you imagine, especially with the day and age that we're in, if Jack had just spread cholera all around first class and the ship hadn't sank, and they got to New York, and Ruth's like, "Do you know, Rose? I think I've got cholera," and Rose is just like, "Wasn't me."
They'll have to raise the yellow flag as they come into port.
Oh, mother, shut up. But yeah, so we spoke about Jack and Rose. We've brought them up. So it seems like a kind of natural point in the conversation to say that I personally, and I've mentioned this to you, I like them. I like Jack and Rose. I think as a character. So I'll talk about Jack first. So Jack, I've watched a video essay on Jack.
Yeah.
And it was so interesting because he will forever be the, why did he have to die?
Yeah.
It wasn't fair. Rose was selfish, blah, blah, blah. Jack had to die.
Oh,
like
100%.
He had a purpose. He served a purpose. He had to die.
Yeah.
In this video essay that I watched, I can't remember the exact name of the YouTube channel, but I will share it in my story one day on Instagram because it's really good. And it talks about the film trope of the manic pixie dream girl. And funnily enough, Kate Winslet played a manic pixie dream girl in not 500 Days of Summer. Zoe Deschanel played one in 500 Days of Summer, but Kate Winslet played a manic pixie dream girl in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And the trope is basically someone who is either very quirky, very different, doesn't abide by the rules, kind of does their own thing, is just super confident in whatever they do, seems to get everything they want, and yeah, and then when they meet the main character of the film, they kind of impart this confidence and this charisma onto them.
Yeah.
And usually it's someone like Joseph Gordon-Levitt or like Jim Carrey in those respective films, someone who's a bit down on their luck, someone who's a bit depressed, someone who isn't in a good place. And by the end of the film, they are in a better place because they met this character.
Yeah.
And Jack is a rare example of a manic pixie dream boy.
Yeah.
Because he has all of these traits and qualities that almost to the point that you would actually think he didn't exist, like he wasn't real.
Well,
and he was real, he did exist.
Did he?
But, well, did he? Well, she doesn't even have a photograph of him.
Mm-hmm.
But it was really interesting. And basically, this video essay was saying he had to die because he and James Cameron has said as much, his narrative purpose had expired.
Yeah.
He didn't have a point to be in the film after that, because Rose just going on that door was that kind of shift.
Wasn't a door.
Door wall, yeah, chunk of wall. I said door automatically, but I've actually said to lots of people, like, if you look at it, it's not even the shape of a door. It's not even a rectangle or a square. It's like a weird.
It's based off
jaggy
the paneling that's above the door in the first class lounge.
Yep, which was it was found, wasn't it? It was retrieved. There was a chunk of wall that was actually retrieved from the wreck site, and that's,
I believe so,
supposedly what Rose climbs onto. Yeah, which I like the fact that they didn't just have like a random bit of debris. It was like a bit of debris that was
like
actually found.
The stuff you saw in the film had a purpose.
Completely, totally. So yeah, the minute she climbed up onto that door, he had done his job. He had made her want to help herself and to live.
Also, you're making a film about the Titanic. It wouldn't make sense to have a happy ending. It was.
Yeah, that would. It just wouldn't.
It's like watching Les Mis and expecting them to live happily ever after.
Yeah, yeah. So I like Jack as a character. He's fine, but I think Rose. I just think Rose is awesome. I think when the ship starts to sink and she goes into like total like Tomb Raider mode, like she turns into like an absolute like heroine. I just think that's so cool. I just think the shots of her, and she's feminine. She's still feminine. She has her long hair, her dress that's translucent and like almost see through when she's wet, and that big pink coat. I just think it's awesome. I think those scenes are just iconic. I think she is such a good character.
They
in
are
that final
superb, and I have actually got some notes about later on in the film for Rose.
Yeah, and even Rose's costumes. I'm a martyr for a video essay. I like a video essay because I'm into writing and all that kind of thing. And one day my dream would be to make a film. And even Rose's costumes. So we first see her in Southampton, which we've spoke about. That scene, and she is very constrained. She's wearing a very tight outfit. She's wearing a huge hat. She's like, you can barely see Rose past the outfit and past the costume.
This is based on an actual outfit of the time, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and the costume designer did a much better job because I've seen the photos of the actual, and I suppose at the time in 1910, 11, 12, that would have been very high fashion. It would have looked awesome. But I mean, Kate Winslet just looks absolutely amazing in it. And she's not, they wanted Gwyneth Paltrow to play Rose. And I'm so glad they went with Kate Winslet, because she actually has the physique that a young girl of that time would have had.
Yeah.
She isn't, because Gwyneth Paltrow has always been a very petite young woman, but people would have actually been concerned about Gwyneth Paltrow back in 1912. They would have actually thought she was ill.
Oh, yeah.
So I think Kate Winslet was a really good casting choice.
Yeah.
So it goes from that costume where she's, completely, and she talks about being caged in, feeling trapped. She looks trapped. She doesn't look comfortable. And her outfits just get more and more loose and relaxed and freeing as the film progresses.
Yeah.
To the point where obviously then she doesn't have anything on.
Yeah.
She's completely naked. And then after that, the one outfit she does wear, it's the brightest outfit she's worn.
Yeah.
It's feminine. It's light. It's transparent. She can move in it. She can run in it.
Yeah.
So I think that little attention to detail with what she's wearing and how it tells the arc of her character is really interesting as well. I liked that a lot. So I like Rose. I'm a fan.
Without the Jack and Rose, I feel like the film wouldn't have been as popular. You know, you've got the people that still. I know friends that I'll say, "Oh, I want to watch Titanic," and I'm not watching that. It's got Jack and Rose in. But then there's some people that like, "Oh no, I want to watch it. I really like looking at Leonardo DiCaprio, or I really like looking at Kate Winslet when they're that age." And the
Or
boob
Billy
thing.
Zane.
You know, I feel like the film needed Jack and Rose.
It did. For you're spot on. For an audience in the mid 90s, it needed that young draw, to make the money back, to make all that money. They were, because I don't think originally he wanted it to be a romance. When you look at the very early posters and promotion images for Titanic, it doesn't show it doesn't even show any sky. It doesn't show like a romantic sky at sunset. It obviously doesn't show Kate and Leo on the bow doing the flying scene.
Yeah.
It shows a very kind of stylized side-on image of the Titanic with the white, yellow, and black of the hull.
Yeah.
And the rivets and the bolts are very prominent. And it just has the word Titanic in big, bold, harsh letters going at a 40-degree angle.
Yeah.
And it looks, if you were to look at that, you would think it was a film like Towering Inferno or, something really dramatic.
You sent me that one because I don't think I've seen that poster.
Yeah, I'll need to send you. So it came out like super early. It came out in like 1996. And so your impression would be that they were making something similar to like A Night to Remember.
Yeah. Which I must say, excellent film. A Night to
Remember is fantastic. We should actually, we do need to do an episode about A Night to Remember because it is really good.
I think it is one of my all-time favourite Titanic films.
Yeah, it's fantastic. But you would almost think that James Cameron was making something like that, where it was, melodramatic because it's set in the time that it's set in, and it is a very melodramatic story.
He almost did though.
He almost did.
If you watch A Night to Remember and then watch 1997 Titanic, they are they're not almost the same film, but there's shots in it that are like almost identical. There's a scene where there's third class coming up to the gate's locked, one of them runs down, elbows a glass and takes out an axe and uses that axe to open up the gate. There's the scene with Thomas Andrews in the lounge and he's standing there up against the clock, and then there's a young couple sat in the room and he talks to the young couple, 97 Jack and Rose. He talks to this young couple who are the newlyweds. There's just so many scenes and so many choices that when you look at that film, you're like, wow, he's obviously a fan. He must be a fan.
Yeah. Oh, completely. Absolutely. I think it would be hard to make any film about the Titanic without watching A Night to Remember or even, reading Walter Lord's book.
Yeah,
because
fantastic.
It's actually, I don't read a lot. It's one of the few books I've ever read. And I'm so glad I did read it because it's just fantastic.
Yeah.
But it's hard to make. I mean, even the scene where Esme gets into the lifeboat and is lowered down by Murdoch, and there's that kind of long stare from Murdoch before the boat starts to go down. I mean, you would think James Cameron thought, A Night to Remember did it better. I'll just kind of remake that.
Yeah.
Because James Cameron could have gone the more realistic route, but again, it wouldn't have fit into the kind of his vision of the film.
Are you talking about Ismay being ordered into the boat?
Yeah, so James Cameron could have had Murdoch, telling Ismay, forcing Ismay into the boat after Ismay has helped passengers on, because it's not, I spoke about it in the essay I wrote that I think there's a bit more evidence to show that Ismay wasn't actually the kind of evil villain character that
was. If I was on the Titanic, I'd get in a lifeboat. No question.
Yeah, I would as well.
Yeah.
I absolutely would. If I thought I could get away with it, if I thought that people wouldn't think the 6'4" person in a wig wasn't a man, then I would give it a go. But yeah, I just think that A Night to Remember is such a huge influence,
Yeah.
and
I feel like in A Night to Remember, the scene with Ismay getting in the boat makes Ismay a lot more villainous because, you know, the boat is crowded, surrounded by hundreds of people. Murdoch shoots his gun,
yeah,
they all run away, and then Ismay gets in. Whereas in 97's film, they show it more realistically where there is no one at the boat. They filled it up. There's no one else to go in because everyone else is still at the back or on the other side of the ship.
yeah. And Esme, I think he does say anyone else, and he is looking about,
Yeah,
and there's a deleted scene that shows Esme being quite frantic. There's a deleted scene of
yeah.
Esme, like the boat isn't ready to go yet, and he's
Mm,
pulling on the davit, and he's screaming, and he wants the boat to go and lower
yeah.
away. And one of the officers has to tell him to basically to f off,
So
like,
that's
or
it that actually happened. That was Officer Lowe, Fifth Officer
mhm,
Lowe. Ismay ran over and was, you know, quite frantically saying, "We need to lower the boat. Get the boats down. Get the boats down." And Lowe, I can't remember the exact quote, but he pushes Ismay back and says, "You want me to lower it now? You'd have me drown the whole lot of them. Step back and let me do my job." Or let me
yeah,
do my bloody job. And one of the passengers makes a remark of something like, he's going to get in trouble for that. Officer Lowe's going
yeah.
to get in trouble for that. So that is based on an actual event that took place.
Wow, wow. See, I didn't know that. You learn something new every day.
Yeah.
Because it seemed like quite a bold choice for James Cameron to make, and I thought, for portray Esme, who always seems so kind of calm and collected, like I would understand that you would begin to panic.
Yeah.
Um, but so, and I think he did cut a lot out, and he kind of had to, or it would have been a very long film.
Hmm.
But then if he had added all that in, it I'd love to see just an entire run of everything he took out. I mean
Yeah.
everything, and just sit and watch it. I mean, it would be longer than the sinking itself,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't even care.
No.
Like I'd sit and watch that, and I'd love it.
I've found the actual quote here. Um, so Officer Lowe says to J. Bruce Ismay, "If you will get the hell out of that, then I shall be able to do something. Do you want me to lower away quickly? You will have me drown the whole lot of them." So that's the actual quote from
Yeah,
Fifth Officer Lowe.
and I do. Part of what I love about the 1997 film is you can tell that that the whole time you're watching it, even if you don't know much about James Cameron, you can still tell watching this film that it's a passion
Oh
project.
yeah,
It is something
yeah.
that whoever made this really cared about
Mm.
what we were making and wanted to make something that was as good as possible.
Not even just the film. You know, he along with the I think it was the DVD release of the film. You could also buy a CD-ROM, which was Titanic Explorer, and that had
Mm,
like deleted scenes, and it had scenes of the sinking without the music in the background, so you could actually experience it. It had a 360-degree tour of the ship where you can walk through the ship by clicking on, like, you click on a different part and it takes you there, and like all the stuff that hadn't been done before for a film. So you can totally see that he was fully invested on this.
absolutely,
Yeah,
and I think that shows. And for all the people that disparage James Cameron because it's not accurate,
mm.
or okay, he said some things about Marvel in the last few years, or well, superhero films in general,
Yeah,
that has a lot of people's backs up. And I just think, I wouldn't say give the guy a break, because he can come out with things sometimes that are a bit grating, and it's like, fair enough.
mm.
And apparently he's not the easiest person to work with.
Mm.
But I think a lot of people, it's almost popular now in the Titanic community, not on the whole, but there's like there's a little subsection of the community where it's popular to hate on the 1997
Yeah,
Titanic, whether it's because of Jack and Rose, whether it's because, oh well, we know how it sank now,
yeah.
and well, Titanic Honor and Glory did it better.
Mm. What we have to remember is that film was so accurate to the information that they had at the
Yeah,
time with the sinking. You know, before then, people said it didn't split, and then
yeah,
he's the first one to put it into, a major movie that's
hmm
showing the split. We spoke before we started filming of Titanic with Catherine Zeta-Jones, where it shows the split, but that was a TV miniseries. This is the first
Yeah, and a miniseries that was kind of rushed to order because of the hype of the film that James Cameron was making.
Yeah. And it's just, the way it sank, and someone watching it would go, that's how the Titanic sank. And it's only now with all this new information, this new science. And, James Cameron's even done documentaries himself with National Geographic where he has shown, okay, I was wrong here. The ship split between the second and third funnel. It split at this angle. It had this tilt to port and then this tilt to starboard. He's corrected himself. He knows he made mistakes, but that's because in 1997, those weren't seen as mistakes. Those were seen as history.
Yeah, completely. And okay, he might be difficult on set, but I just think the guy's a genius. I mean, even I was watching, like I said to you, I was watching a behind the scenes kind of making of documentary on YouTube of the 1997 film. And it's something I've never thought of before, but it makes complete sense. So they were talking about the engine room scenes of the Titanic. Like it was a ship that had basically the same engine,
but like
as the Titanic,
much smaller scale,
but so it was like 1/3.
Yeah, 1/3.
So they built tiny little, well, not tiny, but they built catwalks and ladders and lights and stuff that were also 1/3 of the size, and they superimposed little digital people onto that.
Yeah.
But then, so that's a practical set, like a real, engine room with catwalks and ladders. But then they also would take an image of that and use that as a fake background.
Yeah.
So they were using different combinations of like a real sky, a painted sky, a digital sky, real water, kind of a painted background of water, digital water. So because they were using all these different elements, it never made one look overused or fake, because they were using so many different ones that looked kind of similar, but also a little bit different.
Yeah.
And as someone that wants to be a filmmaker one day, potentially, like listening to that, it sounds like, someone else might be like, I don't get it. Why would they do that? But I'm like, it makes sense, because if you're using the one technique all the time, you're eventually going to see it and go, that looks off, or that looks a bit weird.
Yeah.
Or there's going to be one scene in particular that it just quite doesn't work. It doesn't really look right. So using a different combination, kind of almost randomly, just altering, like, right, for this particular scene, we're going to use it digitally just because I said so. Like, we're going to do it digital. But then for this scene, we're going to do it practically just because I said so. And using that different combination, okay, it's been 23 years since the film came out. Watching it now, we might see it a bit more, because we watch films with, like you said, if they were to remake Titanic nowadays, it would be 90% CGI.
Yeah.
Which is fair enough. But back in the day, watching that, very few people would have been able to see the difference between all these things. And James Cameron did that intentionally. And I just think that level of almost kind of sorcery, like a magician, like, I'm going to do it all these different ways so that when it's all put together, it will look this way.
Yeah.
And I just think that's really clever of him to do. So I really respect James Cameron. I really do. And it's on a sentimental level, it's one of my favourite films, but on a practical level, and for the achievements it made in filmmaking and kind of pop culture, I just think it's incredible. I think it's amazing.
Yeah. It is exceptional. It's one of, in my opinion, one of the best films of all time. That's coming from a Titanic enthusiast.
Go figure.
Yeah.
So, in terms of the strengths of the film, what do you think are the key strengths to you?
You've already got the strength that you're making a film about the Titanic. There's so much in there just from Titanic. There's so much in there. There's so many stories, so many things you can do, so many different eyewitness accounts. So that's already a strength in itself, that it's a film about the Titanic. You get it right, you've done it. Because we have seen things where they get it wrong. ITV's series that said it was going to be the most accurate depiction, and the set was off. There was things, social etiquette that was completely incorrect, CGI that was incorrect, ship layout that was incorrect. But this got everything right, and I think the fact that you had someone like James Cameron behind it, and it's the Titanic, that is a strength in itself. And you've got, I think Jack and Rose, they've got to be a strength to the film because they hold all the film together. They glue all the scenes together, and they also help you introduce different characters. There's a scene where Jack comes down to first class to have that lunch with Rose and her family, and Rose is standing there and saying, "That's John Jacob Astor. He's the richest man." Blah blah blah, and tells you about it. This is Lady Duff Gordon. She's a fashion designer who does naughty lingerie, and we're learning history through these characters. So they've got to be a strength.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like that alone, you're making a film about something that it doesn't matter who you are, what age you are, how many films about the Titanic you've seen. Going into it, the grandeur, the disparities of first class and third class, and it sinks and a lot of people die.
Yeah.
You know that. And that premise alone is so dramatic and so kind of overwhelming and overarching and touching. So that in itself that's such a huge strength. And then James Cameron, who he'd made one of the Terminator films, he was just such a kind of prolific movie maker. So to then make something that originally was going to be just a kind of historical melodrama and became a romance, that was quite shocking to people. People were like, the Terminator guy's making essentially Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
Like, really? Like, people were quite taken aback by that.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good point, that just, Titanic, James Cameron is a strength.
Also, is this intentional, Jack, Rose, Romeo and Juliet? That's got to be intentional, right? I've always wondered this.
Do you mean the whole, the way it's portrayed?
Well, okay, so I know it's a Romeo Juliet-esque story. I mean the names. You got Jack, Juliet, Rose, Romeo. It took me a while to think that.
JR. Do you know, I've never thought of that.
Really?
But do you know, it's potentially just the J or kind of the connotations of those two. I've never
Jack, Juliet,
really...
Rose, Romeo.
Possibly. If it's not, it's like a big coincidence.
Yeah.
And if it is, it's genius, because on a subconscious level, you've already got that kind of rolling off the tongue.
Yeah. And
I just think
any name, and he happened to go for names that have the same initials as the greatest love story of all time.
And it's interesting because when you say Romeo and Juliet, it just rolls off the tongue. It works.
Yeah.
So when you're trying to think of two names that work together, you might as well use two letters that you already know work together.
Yeah.
So, you've got Romeo and Juliet, Jack and Rose. And Jack and Rose, when you say that, it works.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a very effective pairing of names. That's interesting. I've never thought of that. Yeah, that's I like that. I like that a lot. So when we come off this, I'm gonna look it up online and see if he did do that intentionally, and if not, then well done for picking up on that. I think personally one of the main strengths of the film, and it might seem like an obvious one, but the soundtrack.
Yeah.
The music of the film.
Oh my god.
Is just it is one of the best film soundtracks of all time.
Yeah, it
just is.
It's phenomenal.
To the point where James Horner went from, he'd always been working, he'd always been making music for film and even television, but he was recognised when he went to the shop, when he would hand over his credit card or whatever, people would see his name and would ask him, "Are you the guy that made the Titanic music?" And he'd be like, "Yeah."
Yeah.
And then also My Heart Will Go On, he wrote that, and they weren't going to have a love theme.
No.
Kind of pop
song.
They
hid that from James Cameron, didn't they?
Yeah.
They hid that and then recorded it and then said, "Hey, James, have a little listen."
Yeah. But I just think that the soundtrack, the way it uses brass and percussion
for
the early kind of soundtrack for Take Her to See Mr. Murdoch and Southampton,
Yeah.
and it sounds like the pistons and the engines of a ship. It just sounds like that.
I've got to see that one day with a live orchestra.
That would just be incredible.
Yeah.
To see the film with the orchestra, or just the orchestra. Just to sit in a room with an orchestra playing that would be absolutely incredible.
You'd feel the bass and the room. You'd feel the room rumbling, and it'd be absolutely insane.
And then even during, I think it's Death of Titanic, or A Building Panic, I'm not sure. But I suppose it doesn't matter, because it's not like I can produce the noise it makes with my mouth. But there's
go on, go on.
Give it a go. Do a whole orchestra with your mouth. That would be a skill.
I want to hear this. I'm not moving on to the subject until you make the noise from the film.
But I don't even know what instrument it is. It's either I think it's a mixture of. To be fair, there's probably like augmentation and distortion going on with certain things, but it's like a piano and a cello or something, and they both work in tandem. And again, maybe he was going for something different, but to me, when I hear it, I think of a floor angling. I think of a floor tilting, because it has this weird. It goes from being a kind of major sound to being minor.
Yeah.
With a downward kind of, I was going to say crescendo. Is it diminuendo? I'm not sure, but it goes down the way, and it also kind of starts to go minor. But then he also has drums banging, which in the film, at the same time, you've got plates falling off of the shelf.
Yeah.
So he has sat and watched the film with his pen and his paper, and he's thought, right, we're now watching a floor or a ship, a deck tilt or a stern. So I want the sound, the music, to portray it. And for him, for someone to say, how do I write a tiny little section of music that portrays the sound of a floor tilting?
Yeah.
And to do that, and for me to listen to it and go, yeah, and even without the film, to go, yeah, that sounds like a floor tilting.
Yeah.
Like, I just think that's incredible.
Aaron, I've already said we're not moving on until you've made the noise.
I can't make the
Why
noise.
can't you make the noise? Come on.
Because I can't.
There you go.
It'd be like trying to make the TARDIS noise.
Yeah.
Like, how do you make that? I love that that's going to be on the podcast now.
Thanks.
Like, everything you said before we hit record won't be, ever. But that will be forever. So,
and now I want to hear you make the Titanic noise.
But I can. So, moving swiftly on. So, we spoke about strengths. What about weaknesses?
You know what? For me, I'm going to sound biased because I'm such a huge fan of the film, but the only weakness that I can think of for this film is that it's now historically inaccurate. And that's not necessarily a weakness of the film. That's just time passed on and us learning more. Maybe another weakness would be some of the deleted scenes they took out, which, again, it's not a weakness because it was still made for the film, but for me, there's some scenes in there that I'm like, why did you remove that? That makes so much sense for this bit to happen and this bit to happen. You know, there was the fight between Lovejoy and Jack in the dining room as it's sinking, and it got taken out because the test audience said, you know, it's too much like an action film and it didn't work with the pacing. But then when the ship splits in two, you see Lovejoy standing there. He's got blood all over his face. Why has he suddenly got blood all over his face? What's happened here? What's happened to him? We've missed this whole thing where they're having a fight. There's as the ship's sinking, and you know your favourite scene with the poop deck going vertical. The poop deck going vertical. Yes, I did just laugh at that. And Rose is standing there, and she looks to her left and sees this blonde lady, you know, and it makes it like a key part of the film. Like, you're like, wait, hold on, who is this blonde lady? But if you look at the deleted scenes, you know she's a third-class passenger from Sweden who is, you know, not hooking up with, but, you know, she's sort of flirting with Fabrizio. And, like, she's friends with the group, with Tommy, Jack, and Fabrizio, and they just brush over it.
I do agree with that. Olga, I think.
Olga, that's her name, yeah.
Yes, the blonde woman. I do agree with that. Actually, a lot, because when I used to watch it, I used to, as the want to be filmmaker in me would be like, why is Rose looking at her like that? Like, why is there a slight
Yeah.
smile? Because
Yeah.
because like they're both about to die.
When I was younger, I had two theories. One, that she was future Rose, and that was like 6-year-old me going, "That's Rose as well." And then when I was a little bit older, I had this image of, oh, she must have been another passenger that pissed off Rose, and Rose is 17 and she's watching her die, so she's happy. But then when you look at it, she's looking at her, she's like, "Oh, I know you." Gives her a smile, and that's it.
Yeah. Could you imagine that? That like in that moment you see someone that you really hate and like you're also about to die, but you see them and you're like,
As long as they're going to, all right. That's horrible.
like if I'm going down, I'm taking you with me, bitch.
They deleted the scene of her stamping on her fingers, holding onto the rail.
And even actually, the deleted scene of the fight, which I love the fight. It's so cool. Like the fight is just awesome. I wrote a fan fiction years ago.
Oh god, is this suitable for the podcast? Right.
Actually, it's a very tame fan fiction. I'm one of the few fan fiction writers that didn't put any like sauciness into my stories.
It's not fan fiction. Jack and Lovejoy started fighting, and then they embraced.
Well, in mine, I borrow. So in mine, Thomas Andrews is the romantic interest, and Jack has actually gone insane, and he is just slightly insane. So it's Thomas and Jack that fight in the dining room, and I borrowed just the whole imagery of that because I just think it is so fantastic. Just that whole scene, like fighting in a room that's flooding. It's just so cool. Like the stakes are already high, but it does draw it down a bit. But then when you see Lovejoy, when the ship starts to break, he's got blood on his forehead. And again, it kind of works because you think, well, the floor is slanting.
My image in my child head was that as the ship's made that shotgun noise, don't know why they chose a shotgun noise, as it's made that noise, wood has chucked up into his face and it's cut his face up. That's what I thought as a kid.
Yeah. As James Cameron was probably quite thankful that, there was something pretty destructive happening at that point to kind of explain away the blood on Lovejoy's face when there shouldn't really be blood there, potentially. But that, I think I struggled to think of weaknesses of the film, to be fair. The love story, I don't even think it's a weakness because...
Without that, it would just be a couple of Titanic's enthusiasts watching. And I don't think the film would have been as big.
Yeah. No, I was just about to say, how can you see something as a weakness that made a film the biggest grossing film of all time, the highest grossing film of all time? How is that a weakness? It's not. It might not be your favourite part of the film. It might even be what makes you hate the film. But it's not a weakness. It's just not. I think there's a few lines of dialogue that are, although it's a melodrama, it does, or it has elements of melodrama, which of course it's going to. I do think there's a few lines that are just a bit cheesy. And, 1997 wasn't that long ago. But like, for instance, when Trudy says to Rose in Southampton, she's holding her paintings, and Trudy says, "Well, what's the artist's name?" And Rose says, "Something Picasso," and it's just like, come on, something Picasso. It's like, okay, we get it. Like, you're referencing an artist that wasn't super famous at that time, but you could still say Pablo Picasso. Like, you could say his full name in a flippant way or a dismissive way, while still acknowledging his full name. Whereas like something Picasso, it's like, instead of Cal walking in and saying, he won't amount to a thing. He won't, trust me. He might as well just walked in and say, "I bet this ship won't sink." Like randomly, like they're talking about art, and he just walks in like half cut at 1 in the afternoon and goes, "I bet this ship is going to hit an iceberg." And Rose and Trudy are just like, "Okay, Cal, you're drunk, go home." Like it was just a bit like on the nose and a bit cheesy. And there's a few little lines of dialogue like that.
Sorry, you brought up Cal, and now I'm angry. Oh, I hate him.
Do you not like Cal?
Oh, he's an arse.
Oh.
Jack comes down in his perfect suit, looks amazing, and he says, "Oh, you could almost pass for a gentleman." What do you mean almost? It's better than you.
I didn't know you were such a. I didn't know you were such a
But you
Cal
know what makes me
hater.
hate him more? And this isn't even in the film, but have you read about Fabrizio's death? Have you read the script?
Where Cal hits him with the oar. Do you know? See, just for the melodrama, I wish they'd kept that because it would have been just so. But then I think in the script as well, Rose was meant to. Was Rose not also meant to speak to Cal in the original script or one of the original versions? Rose actually is found by Cal and they have a conversation, and I can see why they changed it because it would not have happened. Cal would have dragged her kicking and screaming up to the first class
Oh, and
section
the
and
Carpathia.
like given her to Ruth on
Oh,
the Carpathia, yeah. And Rose stands and says to him, "Tell her I'm on the list of the
huh.
damned," and turns away. And Cal, and you know, there is a back and forth between them. They speak, and whatever she says to him, and I can't forget. All I remember is her saying, "Tell her I'm on the list of
Yeah.
the damned." But whatever she says to Cal, it makes him kind of reevaluate and walk away. But he just would never have done that. He just wouldn't have, because it doesn't matter what's just happened. You know, it hasn't shaken him that much because he was still potentially in the script going
Yeah.
to kill someone to live, um, and even bribe his way onto a boat with a child that he didn't know. So I can see why they cut it out because it wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have been that realistic, and I prefer him just walking behind Rose and not seeing her at all. Um, but I mean, he is pretty evil. But I like Cal just because I've got a bit of a Billy Zane crush. I'm only human. It is what it is. But he is pretty evil. And then even when they go after dinner to the smoking room,
Mm.
and he says to Jack, "Oh, it'll be all
Yeah,
politics
you
now,"
won't be
sort of thing.
interested. Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't be interested. And Jack's just like, okay. I bet Jack would have loved to have
Yeah.
gone and spoke politics. Like, but he was quite gutted. Like,
I
I'm not
have
going to
just
speak
gone back
politics.
and popped the script up. I can go through it if you like with Rose meeting Couch. I wasn't aware this was a scene.
I've
Yeah.
definitely read because I used to go onto a website called I think it was like Cloth Monkey or something Monkey, and I mean when I was like 8, so like
Yeah.
years ago, 8 or 9, and I loved writing, and I used to go on and read this version of the script, and it definitely had a bit where, but it was either in brackets or it was in something, and there's obviously when you write a script, you have certain variations of a script, so potentially he would have written Cal lifts the oar and smacks
Yeah.
Fabrizio, killing him. But then under that in brackets, you'd have the funnel snaps loose and crushes
Mm.
Fabrizio, killing him. So they'd write multiple variations of something, and they obviously they wouldn't film both because that
Yeah.
would be really expensive. But they'd workshop them, or they would discuss them with like
Mm.
an editor, like a script editor or a producer, and the producer would say like, well, no, because Cal killing Fabrizio is just too
Yeah.
evil. It's a bit
But
too
the line
cartoonish.
that Cal has when he says it, let's have a look. Here we
Is it
go.
something about
So Fabrizio says,
America?
"Yeah,
America's that way. He points with the
you
oar.
don't
America's over
understand. I
there.
have to get to America." Cal pointing with his oar. It's that way. Demon in a tuxedo. The image fades to black. That is powerful.
Hmm.
Wow.
It's a pretty. I mean, it's very like
Yeah.
pantomime villain, but it's bloody evil. Like it's that way. Dies. Like, that's just. It's
Yeah.
very evil.
Yeah.
I used to love reading over the script though, but definitely I've read a script version where there's the ending, of course, with them talking, that I've said, but then there's also the one that we see where Cal doesn't see
Yeah.
Rose and Rose is like, phew. But there's
Yeah.
definitely
So
one I've
I've
read.
got it up here. So, yep.
Does it
Yeah.
have it?
Rose is sipping hot tea. Her eyes focus on him as he approaches her. He barely recognizes her. She looks like a refugee, her matted hair hanging in her eyes. Rose. Yes, I lived. How awkward for you. Cal. Rose. Your mother and I have been looking for you. She holds up her hand, stopping him. Rose. Please don't. Don't talk. Just listen. We'll make a deal, since that is something you understand. From this moment on, you do not exist for me. nor I for you. You shall not see me again, and you will not attempt to find me. In return, I will keep my silence. Your actions last night need never come to light, and you will get to keep your honour you have carefully purchased. She fixes him with a glare as cold and hard as the ice which changed their lives. Is this in any way unclear? Cal, after a long beat. What do I tell your mother? Rose. Tell her that her daughter died with the Titanic. She stands turned to the rail, dismissing him. We see Cal stricken with emotion. Cal, you're precious to me, Rose. And then Rose replies, Jewels are precious. Goodbye, Mr. Hockley. We see that in his way, the only way he knows he does truly love her. After a moment, he turns and walks away.
And I can imagine Rose
Mm.
saying those lines. Like, I can just, in Kate Winslet's American
Yeah.
kind of received etiquette school
But
accent,
what's the thing that Cal's done? Is this the shootout that she's talking about, or does she know about him sneaking
Well,
into the
yeah,
boat?
like, he chased them into the bills of a sinking ship
Mm.
shooting at them. And of course, it would be her word against his, so no one
No
would,
one would believe her.
but I mean, and again, Cal is smart. He might be evil, but
Mm.
he is smart. So if Rose tried to, there's nothing, and also Cal knows that she has I put the diamond in the couch. I
Yeah.
put the couch on her. Like, he knows. So she's standing there wearing that coat with the necklace, and she's like telling him
Yeah.
off like a schoolboy, and he's like, he wouldn't just take it off her. He
Yeah.
would. He absolutely would. Like, he would just say, you know what, Rose? Shut
Yeah.
the fuck up. And he would wrestle that coat off her, take the necklace, probably slap her or something, and drag her back up to first class and say, look, Ruth, look what I found. A rat. Like, he just wouldn't, give up that easily. So I almost feel like James Cameron wrote that as
Mm.
I wish.
Do you think maybe he's talking about the fact that they planted the diamond on Jack? Do you think that might be what she means? And locked him in a ship sinking to die?
I mean, she could be talking
Yeah.
about a multitude of things, but even I think framing Jack isn't anywhere near
No.
as bad as, because when that happened, Cal didn't know the ship was
Yeah.
sinking. He didn't actually know the ship was sinking until basically when they were waiting for Jack and Rose to come back, because they had only just witnessed the collision. So Ruth, Cal, Lovejoy, um, they didn't know the ship was sinking at that point when he came up with
Mm.
that plan. But of course, when Jack went down to be handcuffed, Cal didn't care because, whether he drowns or not, it's not my problem anymore. I don't care. Um, but I think probably Rose saying, I won't tell anyone what you did last night, and telling whoever, the media or that Cal did X,
Yeah.
Y, and Z, would people believe her? I don't know. I don't think people would, because Cal was such a kind of rich and
Yeah.
powerful guy. I just don't think people would. And she wouldn't have, people wouldn't stand and listen to a
Girl.
17-year-old, yeah, they just wouldn't, like, it just wouldn't have happened. And at the very least, they would have been like, can I at least, because she hadn't found the necklace then. She didn't
Oh.
know the necklace was in there. Um, she didn't find it until they got to New York. So at the very least, he could have been like, "Can I have my coat back?" And she could have been like, "I
Yeah.
guess." If like she says all that, and then he's like, "Okay, I get it. Can I just have my coat?" And she's like, "Why the fuck do you want this coat?" So, Jesus, like, take it. Like, it's yours. Just leave me alone. But yeah, I remember reading that years ago, and it's just always stuck with me because as such a
Mm.
fan of Rose, you wish you could say that to him, but it
No.
wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have worked. And there's a lot of deleted scenes, like Coda's
Oh.
death. When her and her
Yeah.
parents are running up the stairs and the water pushes them up to the ceiling,
Yeah.
that's really
Very.
intense. Like, I can almost see why they took that out, because audiences would have been like
Yeah.
quite horrified by that.
Yeah. Sorry, there's also a deleted scene where you see Margaret Molly Brown with a drink, and she says, "How about a little more ice?" as the iceberg swoops past.
Yeah. So it goes from like completely ridiculous to,
Yeah.
really tragic. Like, which, yeah, like, okay, it might have been good to have the scene with Molly Brown, to highlight the fact that everyone was having a good
Yeah.
time and kind of emphasize the feeling of security.
Which is actually also another scene from A Night to Remember. So just before the iceberg hits, you see a steward walk up to a glass and fills it up with water, and in the water, ice cubes fall.
So so even that's like almost like an homage to A Night to Remember. Yeah, I like that. It would have been nice to have that contrast, but I do think it was just a bit too, almost similar to the Something
Yeah.
Picasso. Like, it was just a bit too,
too
like, on
tongue-in-cheek.
the nose, like 1990. It's too tongue-in-cheek, yeah. And then as well, I've seen people saying, well, that restaurant or that cafe would have been closed at 11 p.m. As of White Star
Yeah.
Line protocol. And it's like, well, do you know what? It was James Cameron's ship, and if James Cameron wanted the restaurant open at 11:40, then the restaurant was going to be open at 11:40. Like, that's just the way it is. Because the average audience goer isn't going to be sitting there going, I mean, that room was shut.
I don't think he made the film to be analysed so scrupulously. Am I using the word right there?
Yeah.
I need to be more confident in myself. But at the same time, there's so many subtleties in there with actual historical characters and their placement as well during the sinking that I feel like sometimes he did do things for people to go, I know about that. I know about that.
Yeah,
You've got
totally.
Colonel Archibald Gracie. As the boat deck's filling with water, you can actually see him in the background climb up onto the roof of the officer's deck, which he said in his testimony. You can see Lightoller scrambling on top of collapsible B, still trying to get it sorted out as the water's coming up, and that's just in the background, sort of blurred out. There's so many things that he has added in there for people who are, enthusiasts to go, oh, look, he's got that.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
he included
Lightoller
that. I
threatening a
like
bunch
that.
of passengers with a gun and then turning around, hiding the gun to show the gun wasn't actually loaded, and now he's loaded the gun. He didn't want to use that, which is, again, true to his testimony. But then he used a lot of things that people have said happened, but switched who had said it. So Lightoller said throughout the sinking he was looking down the stairs that go from the boat deck down to B deck. B deck? B deck. B deck? B deck.
Yeah.
He says he was constantly using that to see how high.
But then they turned it into
And then in
Murdoch
Murdoch, you
doing
see
that.
it. He's constantly going over. It's at the bottom. It's fine. He goes up. He goes down. Looks down. And you see the water flooding through the door and up the stairs. And that's one of my favourite scenes of the film. That shot. I love it. It's brilliant.
And I can see why they turned it into Murdoch, because, being the first officer, okay, there was the very unfortunate suicide scene where James Cameron eventually had to actually give money to his family, who I think is it Dunblane or is it Dunbartonshire?
Sure.
It's somewhere in Scotland.
There's no hard evidence that happened. There's stories that shots came from where it's his sort of position, and then an officer committed suicide. And some people have said it was Wilde, some people have said it was Captain Smith, some people have said it was Murdoch. There's no way of knowing.
Yeah, absolutely no way. So I can see, because it's almost like defamation to say that. So it was good of James Cameron and 20th Century Fox to give up a payout of money to not only the family but this small Scottish village. But I can see why they turned it into Murdoch, doing that action of going and looking down the staircase, because as the first officer, it seems like a very almost like OCD thing to do, and a very smart thing to do. But then also is like a visual representation of A Building Panic, which is a name one of the songs in the film, and it changes his kind of attitude from accepting the bribe from Cal to then knowing how severe things are and throwing the money back.
But there was also complaints about that, and originally in the script he didn't throw the money back. He shot himself in the head, landed in the water, and then the shot was supposed to be money was floating around him in the water, which was, the idea of that was further painting him as a villain, which I'm so glad that he got rid of. I mean, he could have gone without the whole him taking a bribe, and they can say in the film, oh, well, he didn't take it, it was shoved into his pocket. But then when he's at the boat and he says anyone else, he looks directly at Cal. Cal doesn't get in, and he goes, all right, cool.
Yeah, he accepts the bribe. Like, so even if they didn't have the guy kill himself, they had Murdoch accepting a bribe, which is just so, like, I'm
Yeah.
surprised they did that when they were trying to be, they had White Star Line, like, on
Mm.
the cutlery, like, engraved on the cutlery in the restaurant, and yet they were so willing to play fast and loose with a real historical figure who, okay, there were loose rumors of someone
Yeah.
committing suicide, but yeah, they
Mm.
really went hard on Murdoch, which I think
But
was
then I'm
unfortunate.
not sure if that was James Cameron's decision alone, because in the 1996 film, the miniseries with
Mhm.
Catherine Zeta-Jones, you see the exact same thing. You see Murdoch turns around, shoots two people, and then shoots himself in front of Officer Wilde. So,
I don't think obviously James Cameron and his team would have copied
mm,
the miniseries, but I feel probably, and even with the breakup, I think that most likely there were whispers from the
yeah,
set and the making of the big film that were trickling down to
mm,
silver screen, and they added certain things into this
possibly, yeah,
miniseries. So the breakup, the Murdoch. I think little things were being influenced by the making of
mm,
the big film. But one of the things I found really funny when I was watching it last night was they had Catherine
mm,
Zeta-Jones' character, who was not playing Molly Brown. She's just playing
yeah,
a woman. But she's doing the whole Molly Brown, like,
yeah,
we need to go back. We need to go back for survivors. And it's like, they didn't even have the imagination to make a character, like a rounded person with, like, a story. They just took dialogue
yeah,
from a real person and put it into this Catherine Zeta-Jones character out of sheer
yeah.
laziness, like, which I just thought was really funny because I was like, they could have done the whole Molly Brown thing, but they
No,
just didn't want to because
yeah,
they had
exactly.
Catherine
Yeah.
Zeta-Jones. But yeah, I think the film Titanic, James Cameron's 1997 epic, although we've said that epic isn't good enough a word, um, I personally think it
Oh,
still holds up. When I watch the film, from beginning to end, I skipped the kind of modern day stuff just for the purpose of rewatching for this podcast. But when I watch it from beginning to end, and especially the sinking sequence from the ship breaking to completely
mm,
disappearing under the water, I just think the way that's done and how they
yeah,
done it, like to watch that and hear the sounds of people hitting
yeah,
off of railings and the water bursting out of windows as air is pushed out of the ship. I just think that was all done so
yeah,
incredibly well, and it was really smart of him to put the explanation in the beginning of the film to Old Rose, so that we as an audience can understand the sinking when we're watching it, so we know what's happening, under the water, because we've watched this little digital animation
yeah,
that they showed Old Rose on the Keldish. Um, So I think it's such a
yeah.
strong film. I think it was pitched to the studio less than a decade after the
Hmm.
ship was even found. Um, I just think it is incredibly well made, incredibly
Yeah,
well cast.
definitely.
I think that's a
Yeah.
brilliant cast. I think Victor Garber
Thomas
as
Andrews,
Thomas Andrews
superb.
is just
I don't think there's a single weak actor in that film.
no, no, absolutely not. Um, no, I can't even think of one. The two actors that play the
Yeah.
wireless operators, one of whom was in Corrie, uh, which that I remember him mostly from Corrie, and then I was like, wait a minute, he was in Titanic. Yeah, everyone is just so good in the cast. And I think everyone knew what a big
Yeah.
project this was. So every second that they're on
Hmm.
screen, they are giving it their all. Um, I just think it's a fantastic film.
Yeah.
I really do. And I think that the people that hate on it as hard as they do needs to just
They need to realise that this is a film that was made in 1997, and at the time the film was made, this was what people believed to have happened.
yeah,
Yeah, you can't compare a film and
absolutely.
go, well, actually, we know this is what happened, so that's wrong.
And I mean, there are people like that. Um, and all I would say to them is, if one day you have the funds or the team or the resources to make your own, doesn't even need to be a film, just like an animation or something, where you can portray how you think the ship sank,
Yeah.
great. But you're still going to have hundreds of people that disagree with the way you've portrayed it. Because there are people that still think the Titanic sank the way that he showed it.
There's still people that think the ship sank in one piece and possibly split underneath the water. No, I've seen people say, well, people said they didn't see it sink, so it's possible that as the ship was sinking, it split after it went underwater, and that's why no one saw it. You know, no one's... Because we don't know for 100% what happened, everyone has their own opinion, and we're never going to know.
Exactly. You're never going to please everyone. But he pleased me. I think he made a good film.
I'm glad James Cameron has pleased you.
You know, like highest grossing film of all time. Jim's sitting somewhere being like, I pleased Aaron, and I pleased Louis, and I'm happy with that. That's good.
Can I ask you, do you think Jack and Fabrizio would have got on the Titanic as it was departing, or do you think they would have been told, no, it's gone?
Well, do you know, funnily enough, I have been in that exact scenario. Yeah, I was mortified. I was so embarrassed. Like, because so I was on a cruise in 2015, and the Norwegian Jade, very big cruise ship. We were in Croatia at the time, and we had been in Turkey the day before. And there was a group of people that had become friends on the ship. And when we were in Turkey, this group of people, we had seen them walking around the market. And I jokingly said, because we could tell they were very drunk, I was like, I bet they're going to be late back to the ship. And my partner at the time was like, really? Nah, it'll be fine. And so we headed back to the ship. And lo and behold, this group of people were like pretty late getting back to the ship. And the ship was blasting its horn. And it was blasting it more than it should to let this group know, like, because it obviously knew there were passengers missing. And that was funny. So we all had a good laugh. They came on. They were very drunk. They had a laugh. Great times. The next day, I don't know what happened. I honestly couldn't tell you. But me and my partner and an American mum and daughter that we'd met were in the exact same, but worse. Because they had obviously gotten to the point where they were like, we're going to just have to go. Like, and they can make their own way to like Greece or wherever it was we were going next. And they were pulling the gangway plank up. And I'm quite tall and I'm a good runner, and I just sprinted. And I was like waving, and I was like, hello! and they were very nice. They were very like, everyone on a cruise ship is so eager to please. Because, you know, a lot of the guests will tip very well. So even, you know, people that are being like a nuisance or being, you know, disruptive, you know, the staff are all just very pleasant. And, you know, they didn't give us a hard time. We weren't made to feel like idiots, even though we are. But it was so they lowered it again. And I just apologise. I just kept apologising. But the American mum and daughter were just so gallous, and they were just, oh, it's fine, it happens all the time. I was like, not to me. I was like, I'm a very punctual person. Like, I was so humiliated. But the ship was pulling its gangplanks up. Like, they were getting ready to bugger off. Yeah. It was awful.
Also, another question that I had. Do you think that Jack would have survived if Rose had stayed in that lifeboat? 100%. I've answered it for you. 100%.
Yes.
If Rose had just stayed in that lifeboat, Jack would have survived.
I think so, because he wouldn't have had to have worried about her.
And in my eye,
he'd have just focused 100% on himself.
She would have stayed in the lifeboat. The lifeboat would have gone. Jack and Cal would have separated. And then, you know, I reckon Rose would have been reunited probably with Cal and the family in the Carpathia. And then if Jack survived, they probably would have arrested him again and said, that's the guy that sold the diamond. You know, I don't think it would have ended well for him. I think he would have survived.
No. That's a good question. I think he would have survived if Rose had just stayed in that lifeboat. The music there in that particular scene, when it kind of swells up the minute she jumps back onto the ship. What's it called? Unable to stay, unwilling to leave. That is such a good bit of music. That is just. But she I love that. She's trying to jump off a ship when it's not sinking. She jumps back on it when it is sinking. Like, whoever says that, it's just so true. It's just so true. Like, Rose is a little bit in turmoil.
She's an idiot.
Louis like, let's just call a spade a
She's
spade.
an idiot.
She's an idiot.
He would have had a much better chance of surviving on his own.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he would have survived. Absolutely. It's a shame he didn't. But then, like we said earlier, if he had survived, what would be the point? Because it's not meant to be a happy ending. Or I guess if it's meant to be, it kind of takes away from the real tragedy of it all.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been great chatting to you.
I feel like we've had a really good first episode.
We have. I like the fact that we spoke about things that I didn't even know we'd get into, like the script. Like the fine kind of minutiae of the script. I really enjoyed.
So many notes, and I haven't even covered half of it. I was going to discuss. Yeah,
really?
I've got stuff like bits in the film that I didn't notice before. Like, I'll go through one of them real quick because it was my favourite, and I've never seen it before. Is when they're playing the card game, and you've got the ticket down, and you've got the pocket watch. There's also a switchblade on the table, and later on in the film, as Fabrizio is trying to help release collapsible A, he takes out a switchblade. And I am convinced it's the same one. So I noticed that down. I was like, oh, that's where he got that from. That's clever.
That's a nice little... But potentially then, it could have been his the whole time. Because if they were betting everything they owned, it could have been his always. But that's a nice little... I like that. I like that a lot. Because it is one of those films, because there is so much in every single scene. You will notice, even if it's a tiny thing, you will notice something every time you watch it, if you're looking hard enough. Even like you were saying, you notice the scaffolding. Which, of course, is something that they didn't want you to see. But absolutely. If you're looking for it, you will find something just aesthetically pleasing or factually interesting that you had never quite picked up on before, which I do love about the film.
Yeah, there's always something new that you haven't seen before. Definitely.
Absolutely. But yeah, it's been a really good chat. I've really enjoyed it.
I've let my nerd out.
Exactly. I think I've actually really enjoyed that as well about, since starting the Instagram and now starting the podcast. It's just nice because there aren't many people that I can speak, I say face to face, but, essentially like sit, for like, because we've been recording for nearly an hour and a half, but we were speaking for, a good 20 minutes before that. So, an hour and 40 odd minutes about Titanic and just geeking out over little things. It's just really nice to have that, and even to have the followers kind of watching it as well. Like they're on it. But yeah, just to have all of it and to have you and to have this, like I just think it's awesome. It's great.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed myself. I hope you guys at home have too.
Yeah, I hope everyone enjoys the podcast, and we will be discussing for our next episode the Californian and the Carpathia. So that will be a tale of two ships. We'll be discussing, did the Californian ignore the distress flares because Titanic's wireless operators were rude? Or did they genuinely think they were watching a ship setting off flares at like 1 a.m. for a laugh and then sail into the distance for a laugh? Like, what actually happened? And then just the Carpathia, speaking about the Carpathia and, what kind of job they had to go through in getting the survivors, and actually the communications that they had with the Californian, and then into New York. So I think that should be... I'm really looking forward to doing the research for this one, because the Carpathia and the Californian, I've not done a massive amount of reading on.
I think the only information I have of Carpathia post-Titanic is that she got torpedoed and sank during the First World War. But spoiler alert.
It sinks.
Spoiler alert, it sinks. I don't know about the Californian though, so I'm looking forward to doing some research on that.
Yeah, I am as well. So we hope to see you all in the next one, and thank you for joining. We hope you've enjoyed this first episode of Time to Talk Titanic.
Yeah, we hope you liked it. If you did, rate us. How do you rate on these podcast things?
Do you know, it's different. Share. It could be a thumbs up, could be a love heart. I'd say share. Yep, sharing is always a good option.
COVID, keep away. Not COVID, you hear me. So if you want to share the podcast, share the podcast.
And if it's YouTube, smash that like button.
Hit subscribe.
Of course, hit subscribe. You've got to say all those
Embed
things
the link.
for do it
Embed
for
the
the
link to
YouTube.
your website, to your Instagrams.
That seems like such a boomer statement. Embed the link to your
We should have really
website.
thought of
Okay,
how we're
boomer.
going to do an outro.
Yeah. Hey, I think this has been a pretty good outro.
Okay.
Yeah, and do you know what the best way to end an outro is? Bye.
Oh, thank God he's gone. All right, guys, let's talk about... Oh, you're still here. Right. Bye. Was that too impressive?